Hello there my RPG lovers and welcome to another video. What if you could make your own Witcher? Just imagine for a second that The Witcher 4 has this feature. For the first time ever, you don't start the game as a pre-made character, but you get to fully customize your own Witcher. Some compromises should definitely be made in order for this to work, but it's highly plausible. The most obvious concern about this design decision would definitely be related to the story. The Witcher series is heavily story-driven, and these games were always about Geralt, an existing character with a lot of history behind him. If you want to tell a compelling story in a game, it's almost always better to go with a pre-made character. Actually, this depends on a lot of factors, but it's not far from the truth. So we can argue that the story can suffer if we don't get to play the next Witcher game with an existing character. Some people believe that The Witcher 4 will be about Ciri or even Vesemir. And while I think that would be really interesting to see, I would prefer to experience something entirely different. The ability to make your own character in a Witcher game can open up a lot of interesting gameplay scenarios, which can fit perfectly in an RPG. Witcher schools are a great example of this. We have 7 different Witcher schools in this universe. School of the Wolf, School of the Cat, School of the Griffin, School of the Viper, School of the Bear, School of the Manticore, and School of the Crane. The entire sequel can be oriented around these schools and your interaction with them. However, in order for this to actually work, the next game in the series would have to be some kind of a prequel. I don't think that will be a problem because if we get a new Witcher game, it's highly possible that it's going to be some sort of a prequel. It's really unlikely that we're going to see Geralt or most of the familiar faces from previous games. So going back in time when all the Witcher schools were much more active would make perfect sense from the story and the gameplay perspective. The time when a lot of monsters were roaming the land would be a great fit as a premise. We probably wouldn't get to see all the Witcher schools in action because some of them didn't exist that early on, but it would be an amazing experience even if we only get to choose between a couple of these different schools. And knowing the game philosophy of CD Projekt Red, we would definitely get a lot of meaningful choices to make, no matter what Witcher school we decide to join. It's really hard to speculate about the story itself because there are just a lot of different possibilities, but the gameplay, well, that stuff almost writes itself. All Witcher schools could offer a unique way of playing the game. Even though the fundamental differences between these schools are not huge, I'm pretty sure that CD Projekt Red could come up with unique gameplay mechanics for all of them. Let's take School of the Cat as an example. Cat School Witchers are focusing on speed, precision and agility. Their gear is designed to maximize flexibility and provide the greatest possible range of motion. That could be a great premise for the gameplay that we could experience if we decide to join this particular Witcher school. Or how about the School of the Griffin? This school focuses a lot on Witcher science, and it's even possible that disciples may have specialized in the use of magic. Imagine playing as a Witcher with more advanced spells, now that could be really interesting. The Witchers from School of the Viper are using twin small blades, and they have assassination based approach to killing monsters. The School of the Bear would be an obvious choice if you prefer a more heavy style of combat. These Witchers prefer defense over agility, and along with the Cat School they are the only known Witcher schools to use crossbows in their hunt. The character progression system would have a lot of potential no matter what school you decide to join. This is something that all Witcher games were kinda struggling with, mostly because of Geralt. I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but having a well-known character that already has an established set of skills puts a lot of limitations on character progression. And even though that was the case, I think that CD Projekt Red did everything they could when it comes to the character progression in The Witcher 3. But let's face it, no matter what talents you decide to improve in The Witcher 3, you really can't make a lot of builds that will make your gameplay with Geralt feel different. I definitely think that CD Projekt Red would have a lot more freedom to create more varied character progression based on different Witcher schools. When it comes to the gear progression, The Witcher 3 had a good idea, at least when it comes to unique Witcher gear. Just try to imagine all the different armor sets and weapons for each school that we could get if the gameplay revolves around Witcher schools. Like I said, this stuff almost writes itself. Not to mention the stuff that's already written, like the background and origins of Witcher schools. The School of the Wolf was one of the most recognized of the Witcher schools. Witchers from this school were professional and reliable monster slayers. On the other side, School of the Cat and School of the Viper had a different codex, which could make them a really interesting choice. They would accept contracts of humans and non-humans, not just monsters. All of this just goes to show you the potential of this narrative, and I just scratched the surface. The way that your character interacts with the world would be a lot different. Since you're no longer an infamous Geralt of Rivia, the way you talk to NPCs would drastically change. This is where we could get a lot more different options for interaction, which would help us to mold our character however we want. No matter what dialogue choices you picked as Geralt in The Witcher 3, he's still Geralt, you can't really change the core of his belief system. But having our own character would be entirely different. It's also possible that CD Projekt Red could do something like in Cyberpunk 2077, where you get to choose your own backgrounds. If CD Projekt Red continues to have huge ambitions with each new title, just imagine the possibilities for The Witcher sequel/prequel with similar design decisions that I described in the video. Speaking about Cyberpunk 2077, we can see how the customization options are really important for this studio. So in a similar scenario, the options for customizing your own Witcher would probably be even better. But how about the action itself and the combat mechanics? The combat in The Witcher 3 is possibly the most criticized feature from this game. I personally never thought it was bad, especially for an open world action RPG. It could get repetitive after a while because the game was really long and, like we already said, there is not a lot of different ways to fight. But if all of these Witcher schools offer unique perks for fighting, that could fix at least part of the problem. The rest is kinda hard to speculate, but with all the resources that CD Projekt currently has, it would be much better than The Witcher 3, there is no doubt about it. If you didn't notice already, these are just pure speculations, but I try to keep it real. It all depends on what CD Projekt Red plans to do with this IP when Cyberpunk 2077 is done. Just the idea of making my own character in the Witcher universe really sparks my imagination because the possibilities are endless. I took Witcher schools as the most obvious example, but the lore of the Witcher is really rich, which means that this could be done in a lot more ways. How about playing as a mage? That's another really interesting idea which could be brought to motion, but that's a topic for another video. Before I started to make this video, I made a poll on my YouTube page about this topic. The question was, if you can make your own character in The Witcher 4 and you're able to join a Witcher school, which school sounds the coolest to join? Unsurprisingly, the School of the Wolf got the most votes, obviously because of Geralt. However, other Witcher schools were really close, like you can see here. I ran out of space, so I couldn't include two more schools, School of the Manticore and School of the Crane. I honestly didn't thought this would be that close, but I guess that all of these schools at least sound really interesting. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. Tell me your thoughts about this topic in the comments below. Would you like to play as a custom character in some of the future Witcher games, or you would prefer they continue in the same fashion? Don't forget to subscribe for more content and click on the bell icon so you don't miss any future uploads. Special thanks to my Patreons, and if you as well want to become one of them, all the links are in the description. Patreon is definitely the best place to directly support my work, and every contribution is highly appreciated. That will be all, and I'll see you in the next one.